You are listening to the Mary Jane Society podcast, where you will meet entrepreneurs, cultivators, scientists, doctors, and inventors in the cannabis industry.
I'm your host, Pam Schmiel, marketer and publicist in the cannabis industry. You may have heard of new AI-powered apps that match you to a specific cannabis product based on your preferences and other people who share their outcomes on the app using products for the same purpose. Now there is the HashDash app. It matches flower strains to consumers based on over 5,000 strain profiles. It directs consumers to a nearby dispensary that sells the strain someone is looking for or products with the same strain or similar cannabinoid profile. You can then purchase it and pick it up through the app. Today, our guest is Scott Lynch, the co-founder of HashDash. He shares his journey building the app and working with dispensaries to make choosing and finding strains an easier experience for consumers. Let's welcome Scott Lynch.
And really the goal of our platform is to take this anecdotal trial and error, long-tailed consumer process and shorten it substantially by leveraging data and technology. And so that's really what our platform is. We have created one of the earlier, if not first, cannabis matching algorithms. And the way that we've created that is our database contains over 5,200, actually contains 5,219 strains, and then takes into account over 630,000 data points across all of those strains. And then we cross-reference that with consumer data. So when a consumer signs up for free for our platform, we push them through what we call their HashDash quiz. And that allows us to understand the consumer on a very intimate level. And from there, we provide them with what we call their cannabis aura. Think of this as your unique fingerprint. And that, in a simplistic world, is what we overlay with our cultivar, aka strain data, to give consumer their match percentage to specific strains. And the more and more consumers interact with our platform, like cultivars or strains or thumbs down, write reviews, etc., the better we're able to understand due to our machine learning. And so the more accurate the recommendations are for the consumer. So that's really what we've built in a nutshell. That's the front runner, is the matching algorithm aspect. We have an educational aspect with our guides. We have over 71 different guides, and we built a science advisory board that has helped us with that education aspect, along with the algorithm too as well, to ensure that it's scientifically accurate. We've got a PharmD, MD, and a PhD on the board to hold us to a higher standard. And then lastly, we have a community aspect where similar consumers can connect with one another. So maybe you're dealing with chronic migraines and you notice Becky from Pennsylvania is dealing with the same, and some of these strains have worked for her, hopefully influencing consumers to do more due diligence on those strains on our platform. So it's a very holistic approach, but I think the ROI is very much around consumer empowerment through technology and through education. And I think technology has been met with some abrasion over the years within this industry. And I think there's a really interesting and powerful place for it to actually assist consumers and really give them the right data and the right compass to make better decisions. So we call that purposeful cannabis consumption. And that's something that we're really focused on, because you have a better outcome with cannabis, you have a better outcome and quality of life. And so we hope to aid and build that bridge for consumers. So that's really the HashDash platform in a nutshell right now. We spent 2 years in development, and then we only launched beta early Q1, late Q2. So it's been really interesting to just see the data and see this algorithm, refining this algorithm and supporting consumers. Now, in regards to the dispensaries and products, so that is actually what we're currently working on, is the specific product integration aspect. Now, why we started with strains first is because flower, as you're aware, is the highest consumption category by pretty big margin. And so we wanted to start strain specific there. I also think, and we also think, that understanding strains, terpenes, cannabinoids, etc., are really the most important foundational aspects as a consumer. I can't tell you how many times I've heard a consumer walk in, say, I want your highest THC product for your cheapest price point. I die inside. I implode a little bit because cannabis is so dynamic and it's built of over 500 different compounds. And so there's a lot more for consumers to navigate, and being empathetic, they haven't had the tools or resources to make those thoughtful decisions. And so
Yeah.
we started strain specific because that is what we've been training our algorithm on, and it's allowed us to collect this data on consumers. And then we're actually connecting to the POS API systems within dispensaries. Now, that is actually a massive challenge. We interviewed hundreds of dispensaries that have actually said that even the clunky process of Leafly and Weed Maps, they don't even have it down. And so it's a pretty monumental challenge. Additionally, there are about a dozen different POS systems. Some of them are certainly have larger market share, like Dutchy is a good example. But that API integration is fairly complex and comes with its own flaws, especially because inventory within a dispensary turns pretty quickly. And so those are some of the challenges, and you have to map all of that, right? So you have to not only map that in the ecosystem of that POS system, but then how does that map and translate to your platform? So we wanted to master first the algorithm and really learn more from that and train that then we can transfer over into product specific aspects. Now, of course, I'm biased because I'm the founder of this business, but there are other matching products out there, like Terply might is a good example, where they have a little plugin on the website and ask you one or three, I think it's three questions, and then they'll pair you with products. Jointly, I know you mentioned as another one in your initial email, the limitations I see with those is that there's data, but there's not as much data as I think they should be leveraging. And what do I mean by that? Because we have an ecosystem where users are signing up and they're interacting on the platform, we collect massive loads of data on the consumer. So when the consumer looks at a menu, it's not just a point in time where you're asking Stacy, what effects do you want to feel today or for this transaction or for this specific product that you're looking for. We're not only taking that into account, but all of Stacy's interactions, because consumers aren't the best at really telling you what they need or understanding what they need. And
Mhm.
so that foundation starts with our quiz, but then the interactions and the tracking take more of the behind the scenes or the aspect that the consumer really struggles to articulate or even feels intimidated to communicate to a bud tender in person.
So are you tapping into, when you integrate into a dispenser, you're tapping into their data, their shop,
So
the customer, and you're using that, then you're kind of bringing that into your platform to make informed decisions? Kind
So it'll be the POS systems themselves will just be for the product inventory aspect. It won't be for the consumer data aspect, tracking side. And quite
Okay.
frankly, I'm not entirely sure um, how many of those POS systems have a ton of analytical features. Like they might have transactional, but I'm not sure how deep they go into the consumer side. And my point being is that we have a lot of insight into the consumer because they're not only providing this information when they first sign up, but then they're taking all these different actions on the platform that allow us to better understand the consumer, right? It's
Yeah,
very
that's
much
great.
how Meta has built a multi-billion-dollar business, because when you like a certain page, follow a certain person, etc., they can start to map and pinpoint and build this kind of aura of who you are as a consumer, and then their ads are better tailored for you, etc. And so
Yeah.
ultimately a better experience for you and the brand. And so the POS system or integration there would be just for the product aspect and the data on that product. So, certain terpene profile, cannabinoids, etc. Those things. But we have the consumer data aspect along with the preferences that they have with certain strains, etc. Right? So it should make that connectivity a little more seamless and a lot more robust for the consumer rather than asking a few questions at time of transaction
Oh,
or
yeah.
looking at a specific menu.
So would you integrate into the dispensaries by doing a plugin like you're saying? Is that how you also interact? Or okay.
That's right. So the way that it works right now is this is somewhat standalone as we build out, as I mentioned, the algorithm and the data set. But you sign up and you say, okay, I'll just give a random example. I'm a 75% match to wedding cake. That's great. And the consumer gets to understand and educate themselves on that strain on our platform and other aspects, like I said, of terpenes, cannabinoids, how cannabis interacts with the
So
body.
much, so much.
And there's so much to it, right? But
Yeah.
then the second piece and second phase that we're currently working on is great. Where is that relative to my current location, right?
Oh,
And then
great.
you'll be able to find, so we're taking a way more personalized interaction and technology than say Leafly and Weed Maps. And we had done a ton of cold outreach to a lot of consumers who have used those platforms and felt that they had prioritize revenue aspects because they have a fiduciary responsibility. They're publicly traded companies and really deprioritize the consumer. And so we really wanted to focus and uh, um, just focus on the consumer, ensure that they have the best tool possible, right? And so that's where we're hyper focused on this personalized aspect. So, okay, great, I'm a 75% match to wedding cake. Where's that relative to me as far as dispensaries are concerned? And then not only that, one of the pieces to that, a byproduct of that is we'll be able to match consumers to different dispensaries. So for example, let's say you, Pam, just filled out the HashDash quiz, you spent some time on the platform. We now understand you as a consumer. Not only can we match you with specific strains and say, okay, wedding cake is 75% match, but this dispensary, the ratio of products that actually match you are the highest. So maybe driving an additional 5-10 minutes, 5-10 miles might make a lot more sense to you because the product profiles that they have align at a higher percentile than the dispensary closer to you that has 1 or 5 different products that might align with you. And the benefit to the dispensary, and I think the dispensaries have a very rude awakening coming over the next 5 years, is that there is no there's no stickiness that most dispensaries are creating. They're not creating a sticky customer. There isn't really loyalty, right? Oh, this company, sure, maybe they're vertically integrated and grow their own products, and so they're higher quality or more boutique focused, for sure. But I do not believe that is going to be a long-term differentiator for a lot of these dispensaries. So they need something more dimensional and holistic to create the trust of the consumer, to better understand the consumer. A lot of dispensaries don't understand their clientele, their consumer base, and create the trust and a reason for the consumer to come back. And so transactions are 23% higher with a personalized experience, right? Just like there's data that shows a longer quiz, the more the consumer or person filling it out thinks, oh, this is going to be hyper specific to me because of how in depth it is. And there's actually a YouGov study that shows 54% of consumers have had a unsatisfactory past experience with cannabis, heightened anxiety, paranoia, etc. And that goes into the anecdotal side of things, right? What their friends told them, a colleague, a family member, or even a bud tender, because there's no national training system for them and it's left up to the dispensary. So I see a tool like ours bringing a lot of value to the consumer and the dispensary.
And especially since dispensaries are, again, in state silos and they all sell the same product. So how do you differentiate? If you were a store in any other industry, you're cherry picking from all over the
Right.
world. And that's what makes your store unique. That's how mom and pop stores had to stand out from the Walmarts and the Targets of the world who started, eating into their market share they have to stand out by these, products. So I totally agree.
Right.
And also that it's educating the consumer, because right now it's kind of like, I'll take that one. I mean, you don't really, you have an idea, and all they talk about is sativa and indica, and the fact that you haven't completely like integrated into these retail stores yet, like you said, the challenges of integrating into their POS systems or whatever. It's really the future that I want to talk about too. I mean, I
Yeah.
understand that this is what you're not there yet, but what is your ideal plan of where you want to be integrating? That's what's the end result here? Like where, because a
Great
lot of this
question.
stuff is new.
So I love the visionary question because we're super hyper focused on what the future holds for us. So phase one was build this matching algorithm, well, collect the data, build the algorithm, and start to understand the consumer base. Phase two, which we're currently in right now, is connect to the POS systems and the menu of these dispensaries. So consumer says, okay, great, I know I align with these strains. Now where can I find it relative to me? And so that's currently what we're working on. What we also have, and I know this was on your bullet list too, and we're just over 75%, almost 80% there, is retail media advertising for brands on our platform. Because here's the thing, as I'm sure you're aware, it's there are not a lot of places for cannabis companies to advertise on. And even if you get away with, and we've done this before at my last company, advertising on Google and creating a separate landing page, etc., it's just a matter of time before Google catches wind and shuts you down. And so to me, that's a bottleneck and a very risky position to be in as a business. And so because I had mentioned that we have such unique data on our platform
Yes.
users, a brand can come to us. I'm just making something up here. Let's say a vape company comes to us and says, hey, listen, we want to target females between 30 and 35 within this geolocation that have these specific preferences. Maybe it's for specifically sleep, that consume 1 to 3 times a month. We can get hyper targeted, and those are what we call our hyper targeted ads. And we only show those ads to that hyper targeted high intent consumer. Now, you can purchase advertising on Leafly and Weed Maps and some of these other places, but what they do is they do general ads, which we can also offer. You buy 100,000 impressions for X amount of dollars per CPM, and once you hit that impression, the campaign's over. And so we can offer that, but we offer a much hyper targeted ad for the brand. So the ROI is significantly higher for the brand because we're not just saying, oh, we want to advertise to cannabis consumers. Okay, well, there's niches everywhere in this industry. And so we can't just assume that every cannabis consumer is going to be a potential purchaser of your product or of your service. So let's get more specific. And so we've built, like I said, 75 to 80% of our ad dashboard where partners can upload their ads, pick their campaigns, select all their preferences, and we'll push out those ads on our platform. And so that's the full spectrum of things. I also mentioned actually matching with other dispensaries, depending the higher percentile product match across the board. And then we want to build other things where we take this kind of Spotify approach where you can build consumption lists, as we call them. So maybe you go kayaking and hiking with friends and you have found some of these strains or some of these products to be awesome companions when you're exercising or when you're doing creative writing or artwork, etc. And so as part of the profile aspect, you'll be able
Oh,
to build
categorize it. Yeah.
you'll
Oh,
be
that's cool.
yeah, consumption lists and share those. And then we're also going to bring our algorithm over to match consumers with each other. So based on their preferences and based on their strains that they prefer, we'll be able to pair you with different consumers that will help your journey as a consumer as well. So we have about 177 different aspects to the platform, but I think the crux really are focused on those specific aspects for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, wow. Yeah. Well, actually, I'm sorry. I just want to make sure I didn't miss any questions. Actually, the whole idea of what you're talking about of the media, what did they call it? There's a term that I've been reading about. It's just trending everywhere. It's media. Oh, it's retail media networks for
Mm,
advertising. So for the exact same reason, and this is a term that you're just seeing everywhere, just in mainstream, but all the, marketing ad, magazines right now, if you Google that term,
mhm,
and for the very reasons you're talking about it, is that the digital network that they're building with all this, bridging online and retail data points that they're gathering is really opening up targeted opportunities for advertisers to
mhm.
advertise more, efficiently and more transparent on what the ROI is, because it's all digital and it's in store and it's targeting, from the kiosks to what, to HashDash to, menus, and, like there's so many opportunities that the retailers can also start generating revenue through ad dollars, but offer a better targeted advertising. And also with AI now is really changing the way, keywords aren't really working, and, search intent and how that's going to, change everything just in Google advertising. AI is changing all that. So
Yeah,
it's, yeah. So
I
I think it's
couldn't.
going to even push brands closer to retail, their little ecosystem of advertising. So
Yeah, I could not align with this more. I think,
yeah,
the other aspect is just the brands and the dispensaries need to understand their customer base better. And so our advertising dashboard will actually be open so you can actually get analytics, based on the tier that you're in on the consumer. So there's so much potential to take that data back as your business and influence your marketing, your approach, your copy to, I mean, it touches
yeah,
every piece of the marketing aspect to the business. And that's why, businesses like New Frontier, et cetera, are great because data is everything nowadays, right? The better we understand, the better we can approach
yeah,
everything from,
exactly.
and I think the more that it extends beyond transaction, right? This is a very transactional business. And so I look at it as like, how can we create a more holistic relationship based? Because when you play in the game of transactional, it's a race down to the bottom. Look at what's happened over the last couple of years since COVID. There's been major price compression, right? That's just a race down to the bottom, right? There is no winner there. There is no winner at all because
Mm.
even the consumer, you could say, well, they win because they save money. Yeah, they get an inferior product that might have had steps skipped with testing or falsified lab reports. Like the list goes on and on. And so I think that is absolutely not the path to a successful, cohesive, productive industry where the consumer isn't given the short end of the stick. And so I truly believe that technologies such as ours have so many different value propositions to these businesses. And quite frankly, raise the bar and the standard. The standard is so low in this industry, with consumers walking and like I said, highest THC price point and cheapest, and then dispensaries go and they shop around labs and get, and so like, it creates all these fault lines that I think we need to collectively come together as an industry and leverage technology to bring this higher standard and stick your customer and less of a transactional process and more of a relationship based and a more intimate process. And I think one of the blockages and challenges, Pam, you asked earlier, I think in this industry is that many consumers are intimidated to walk into a dispensary. I've been to hundreds and hundreds of pop-up events, whether I'm walking into the dispensary or part of them. And this is kind of what we call the can of curious, right? They walk in and they make a quick decision to just get in and out as quickly as possible. And I
Because they're
see the
uncomfortable.
approach, they're very uncomfortable. And I understand cannabis is so intimidating. There are so many things to understand. Where do I start? Is there a way to leverage technology that minimizes the anecdotal trial and error, but also a consumer is way more willing to divulge all this information to our technology and rather than a bud tender because it isn't this intimidating confrontational process, and nothing against the dispensary, of course, it's just the way it's been built. But they're going to give us a lot more information and then they're going to behave on the platform that will give us more information that we can then use for things like the POS integration, but also eventually something further down the line is, could we use this data to actually train bud tenders? Because there is no national training system. So there's a lot of what I call sawdust data that rolls off the business that can be utilized in a very economical, thoughtful, privacy aspect to it too as well.
So I think the educational aspect of it is super important, but also the future of personalized medicine. Personalized medicine is being developed by single strains. And doctors, I interviewed actually a scientist, a drug discovery scientist in Israel who has formulated that just got into the marketplace there, and they want to bring it to the United States for breast cancer. But it takes to get to that one formulation for this specific type of breast cancer. He works with cultivators over there. Once they painstakingly find out which cannabinoids and which ratio, which levels they need to, to show up in the strain, they develop these specific strains for this. And that's the future of medicine. It's not even the future of medicine as we know it in pharmaceuticals, but it's the future of a variety of cannabis products that will treat different, different indications. And it's the single strain. And it's also the single strain that's going to be used in in products like beverages, and just and it's not, it's not going to be a mixture of distillates, combined in together, creating our own little formula. But it's going to be single strain products that we say, we know this strain is great for sleep, and that's what brands will be promoting. So this is almost like a research project as well. You know?
Yes, I love that you hit on this point, because I think this industry has collectively worked backwards from other industries.
Because we've been, we're tied. Research hasn't been possible. That's the big problem and that's been the other problem is we don't have the research to back up what all of us are saying.
Yeah, the claims,
And
right?
yeah, all the
Yeah,
claims.
yeah.
So, hopefully we're on our way. It's opening up. So,
Right.
but I'm just saying this could be a big,
I,
help
I, I I
direction.
could not agree with you more. I mean, listen, there are thousands and thousands of clinical studies out there. And I think we're up to maybe 30,000. So there's thousands and thousands of
Yeah.
studies out there. I think from the consumer standpoint, um, white papers and studies like it is not for the average person, right? The average reading level here in the United States is seventh grade, right? The average consumer is not going to be able to digest that information, which is
Oh,
why we put our educational resources together with the help of our science team to say, bring this down a few notches, right? For
yeah.
everybody to understand. So it's not as intimidating, it's easier to remember. And it's actually why we've gamified the educational aspect. So when you read through a chapter, there's a fun chapter question, a quiz question. And the more that you answer those on your profile, you get educational badges. And so we're trying to influence a consumer to do more of that due diligence, because if he or she understands more, passes it to someone else, that network effect is very powerful. And what I more so meant, kind of working backwards, is you have this gray market that's existed for a very long time. Cannabis has been around for thousands and thousands of years, very much been used for thousands of years for its medical attributes. And there's plenty of data out there now that shows that this is a productive plant. And they say every consumer is actually a medical consumer, right? You say, hey, I want to use this to help with anxiety or stress. Okay, well, that's the medical aspect. And I think you're 100% right. I also think, a lot of the things that we've done, we're only doing them in this industry because it's what's been known. But like sativa and indica, those are horrible classifications. It was only a classification system to identify the physical attributes of the plant, not to say every time if you consume a sativa or an indica, these are the feelings that you're going to get. There's zero scientific data. Actually, Riley Kirk, our PhD, one of the individuals on our science advisory board, she's one of the biggest cannabis influencers too,
Oh,
actually mapped out all of this and showed on this chart how actually irrelevant those classification systems are. And so, we classify those on our platform right now that way, but we're hoping as we build more credibility, we can break the mold. And again, that's what I mean by raising the bar in this industry, because just because you've done something for a long time doesn't mean it's the best way to do it, right? We were riding around in horse and buggies, and someone was like, hey, Henry Ford was like, maybe we should put something that's motorized that can get us further across the state at a faster rate. And so that's where I think technology in the private sector really helps to amplify and speed up that process. But I think education needs to be this like connectivity tissue in lockstep with that, because you can't just tell consumers, or I don't think it's responsible to just tell someone what they match to, right? Like, why do I match to that? That's what they need to understand, because also because when they're in person and maybe not using your technology, you still want them to have a really good experience, right? And if you don't, then it's just you trying to keep the consumer on your platform. And I'm all for capitalism, but like there's a way to do it responsibly and economical for everybody. And so that's why I think education is such a big piece of it too.
So how are you staying on top of all the zillions of different strains? I mean, breeders, are out there coming up with new new genetics, and
Well,
are
yeah,
you just looking at what's in the products now, like the strains that people are promoting? It must, and I'm sorry, and it must be getting easier because I feel like rosin products, non-solventless, single strain products are
yep,
becoming more
prevalent.
popular and
Right,
more, that
right.
it's going to take over distillate at some point. It's just,
Correct. I think this goes back to your point earlier, in that we have 5,219 strains in our database, over 630,000 data points across all of them. There's probably a good chance that if you look up a strain on our platform, we will have it. Now, I think there's actually a lot less strains out there, right? So in order for something to be genetically different, considered different, it needs to have a percentage of difference between those products, right? Between those strains. I do not believe that there are actually 5,219 strains, right? Like we have wedding cake, Girl Scout cookies, sour diesel, like so many different strains nowadays that have been crossed and crossed and crossed and crossed and crossed, and most of them are quote unquote hybrid. I actually don't think there are that many. So I definitely think there needs to be a more thorough job of this industry to better identify actually what strains exist out there. But
mm,
as it relates today, we most likely have the strains. And as far as keeping up on it, we're always scanning the edges of the internet to understand what's up and coming. Like Runts has been a pretty popular strain over the past few years. And so we have that on our platform. And so we continually are searching, but I don't really think, if I'm being 100% honest, that there are that many strains out there. I think it
yeah,
is very much the marketing play, and that's what I mean by going backwards. It's not like, hey, we're trying to solve for X or Y. Let's try to develop a strain or a product that helps X or Y. Now, that's certainly happening now, right? There are edibles out there that are specific for sleep, right? That is happening. So I don't want to take that away from the industry. But I do not believe that they're genetically speaking that there are this many different strains. And trust me, my last business, what we did is we had a 10,000 square foot cultivation facility with a lab, and we did tissue cultures every single like week, thousands and thousands of them. And I went around to hundreds of cultivation facilities. I was up in Organigram up in Canada, Humboldt County, with farmers that have been growing before longer than I've been alive, to True Leave down in Florida, Pritch in Puerto Rico, to your mom and pop and caregivers, single state or MSOs. And I learned a lot about the plant, but I also learned that I really don't think there are that many strains out there. That
oh,
falls
okay,
into the classification system too as well. I think genetically speaking, there are probably, you could probably whack 30% of the strains out there. But more mass research would need to be done to prove that hypothesis. But if you ask any cultivator
yeah,
that's been doing this long enough, they'll tell
yeah,
you that, right? I think it's very much the marketing play and the clout that comes behind this is my strain.
mm-hmm.
but I don't think there's a lot of science rigidity behind that. But again, this is what's been marketing, this is what's in the industry, and so we got to chisel away at this piece by piece. And so
Hmm.
we can't, to your point around education, you can't take it all at once. And so it's piece by piece that we're trying to
Yeah.
build here.
Yeah, yeah. And was your previous position in cultivation? Is that where you kind of grew up in the industry?
So, not cultivation per se. So what we did at my last company, I was the second employee, became part owner in the business, was we were trying to understand what cannabis needed from an NPK standpoint. So from a fertilizer input standpoint. And so
Mhm.
we had this 10,000 square foot grow, and every single harvest, we were just testing different ratios of nutrients to understand what cannabis needed, and then doing these tissue cultures to understand how cannabis responded to these different ratios. And then when we went out and developed um, fertilizer specific to cannabis, and we were one of the first companies that talked about heavy metals. Nobody else was talking about cadmium, arsenic, lead, and mercury when it came to fertilizers. They were
Oh,
talking about it in the finished plant, but our point was, listen, if you're feeding this, and this was over a decade ago, if you're feeding this plant, cannabis is known as a absorber, right? And it will absorb the material out of the media and what you feed it, and not to the same concentration rate. But you have to think that then consumers are combusting this product, and if there's even, parts per million in there, that's entering into your bloodstream at a 40% concentration rate. And so we were doing a lot of the conversations with this. We even did a blind taste test with over 80 massive cultivators on flushing, because there was this idea that you need to flush your plants at the end of harvest. And so we were like, is that really true? Or is that just something that's been said? And so we did a lot of these fun things that broke the mold of the norm in the industry. And that mindset really translated or opened up this portal into this platform that we built, because we're like, wait a minute, is that the best way to do it? Like, I myself am so, like, I look at a menu and it's overwhelming and my eyes go over it. I don't know where to start. And it's like, is there a better way to do this? And the answer is always yes. But the bigger question is, well, how? Right. And that was the start of the 2 year journey of starting to aggregate the data, map the data, build the algorithm. We had to build fake consumer profiles to see how the algorithm responded to those different profiles. And so it's been a massive undertaking. I didn't think it would take this long, but it's been a lot of fun. I've learned a lot, and it gives me goosebumps to help people.
yeah. So you're saying you mean that previous company is where the foundation for this company, obviously, I mean, it seems like it, but did it merge together or is
So
it?
it's where the idea started, because what I was doing is I was a week on the road to going to all these different cultivation facilities to see what products they were using, what they like, and testing our products. And so I spent a lot of time. I'd spend a couple of days out in the grow or a week out in the grow, and I'd travel to the next one. And so I was on the road constantly. And what I realized is, wow, these cultivators who the consumers kind of think are experts are even relying on this like trial and error. And that is kind of life. If we getting down to brass tacks, like we try something, it works, we double down, it doesn't, we pivot. But I thought to myself, man, if the cultivators are having this much of a challenge and learning every day as we should be, but I can't imagine the consumer, and myself being a consumer since junior year, I was like, wow, I hadn't even thought about it because I was more on the back end of the industry, as I like to call it, on the cultivation side. But I'm watching consumers and thinking about my own experience, and I'm like, this is a horrible, horrible process. So you're telling me there are thousands of strains out there and then thousands of different products, and we're leaving it up to dispensaries for a bud tender who there's no national training program, who has maybe their education is coming from their personal experience and the limited amount of consumers stepping through the door. We're relying on that. And then the consumer not maybe knowing what they actually need because they don't understand themselves or these products. And I thought to myself, this is a huge, huge problem. And a good friend that I went to high school with is one of the top SEO specialists for kayak.com. And so we
Oh,
started doing some digging on search volume on Google. And this was part of the discovery phase of our platform. And I said, Jordan, I want to understand something. What does search volume look like for cannabis online? So people typing for wedding cake strain, or strains that help with migraines. Come to find out, it is the search queries are almost the same volume for things like that as people searching for couches and beds. And everybody has one of those. 99% of people have one of those. So that showed us that there was massive demand and a problem that needed to be solved. And then we dove a little step deeper and I said, how good are Leafly at Weed Maps at SEO optimization? And because they have, Leafly, I think, is 9 million uniques a month and Weed Maps is 14 million. And he said they're good, but it's not that they're great. It's that the guy down below them, the business down below them, is at 800,000 a month. So it's a massive delta. And so that showed us that a lot of these companies really just don't understand SEO optimization, and it's a constant evolving thing. And so that was the opening for us to say, not only the personal experience that I got there and saw and problem, but then Google and SERP's SEO showing us that there was massive volume of people searching for this. So they're not getting the answers that they need or in the fashion that they need them. And
Oh,
so
oh, I
when the light
see.
that's when the light bulb kicked off, turned on, that I was like, we have to build some sort of technology to personalize this. And the way that we're going to funnel traffic into our platform is through SEO or is through organic. And so we've SEO optimized all of our cultivar pages, the biggest ones, all of these things to attract that funnel of people, consumers coming in searching on Google. And that's how a majority of people land on our platform. About 85% is through SEO organic traffic. And so this is a massive problem that needs to be solved.
Right. And so is it basically because Leafly or Maps isn't getting in the weeds and getting down to the detail of all these different strains? Is it, is the SEO not good because they're not doing strain specific on all these things?
So their SEO is good. It's not great,
Yeah,
right?
right.
And good in this industry in regards to SEO gets you much further ahead, right? Like I mentioned, Leafly is at about, I don't remember, it changes, but 9 million monthly uniques, and Weedmaps 14 million. The next company down is only getting 800,000 a month, right? So that shows you the massive data and traffic that they're driving. Now, granted, Leafly and Weedmaps have been around for quite some time in this industry, right? So they've created backlinks, they've done all these things. But there are some shortcomings that they could do to enhance their SEO. Now, the reason why I think it's a low priority is because that million uniques a month is really good. You can create a great business from that. Now, they have some other financial struggles like, debt and stuff that we've seen in the headlines. But I think, and what we have witnessed based on our interviews with consumers, is that they're focusing their efforts, their development efforts, around the revenue aspects of the business, right? Because they have that fiduciary responsibility. Obviously, businesses need to make money. So I'm not faulting them for that. However, I think there's a balance there. And so we are hyper focused on the consumer experience. And as part of that hyper focus, it's the personalization aspect. Now, Leafly and Weedmaps aren't spending time doing that, right? They're making their money off of their dispensary pages and their advertising. But at
Hmm.
my last company, we advertised through Leafly and Weedmaps, and it was a very, how do I professionally put this? It was not a great experience, and we had to beg for data. And so that made me question. We got an Excel spreadsheet with a few pieces of data on it, and it wasn't ideal. And that got me concerned on the credibility behind it and their abilities on the technology aspect, and consumers the same way. I think it's great that you show all this information on strains, and that's wonderful, but like, you need to create another connection there. And that's where the personalization and the education are parsed with our platform. These are separate, and we still interviewed tons of consumers that said, I still have to have 5 different tabs open to do research on these strains. And I'm like, well, that's a problem. That's not an
Yeah.
ideal situation, right? How do you think it could be better? How are you using this platform? What do you like? What do you dislike? And so we aggregated all those pieces of information and then made sure they were core pieces of our platform as part of those early phases.
I don't have anything else. Do you? I feel like you've told me so many great things.
We have an incredible science advisory board that holds us accountable and on us into a higher standard. We've got a great tech stack that we're continuing to get better, and we've built slower than I would like. However, the benefit to that is that we've been very picky and thoughtful of each of our steps. And I ultimately think that's the right path. And I'm willing to divulge all of these things because I think authenticity and transparency is important, but also if you can build it better, good luck and hats off to you, because this has been one hell of a platform to build and there's so much work to still do, but it's incredible when someone goes, I can't thank you enough for how helpful your platform was. And
Well,
that,
I'm definitely going to sign up for it. I have to check it out because
yeah, give
I
us.
think it's one of the things I've kind of was keeping a little journal myself of like, well, I like this, and it's like, well, what ratio combination of different cannabinoids are in there, and I
Yeah.
literally have this on my notes on my phone. I'm like, this is not working.
Well, it's funny that you say that because one of the smaller features we'll have is you can actually, when you favorite different strains, you can
Yeah.
write a blurb, a little journal entry on that. Um,
Yeah, I think
I,
that's important.
it so is. It
I
so is.
think that's good for my own right, how I would personally do it.
Yeah.
And are you raising money or do you have money behind you? How
So this has been self-funded. I put six figures of my own money into the business because I truly believe in the business. So it's been bootstrapped thus far. We get a team of 8 developers, 3 science advisors, and 1 advisor. Um, and so it's been self-funded up until this point. We're open to raising capital, but I think, at my last company, we brought on some money, and towards the end, there was definitely headbutting. And so, my mentor always says, money is abundant in the world. As much as people might not believe that to be the case, what isn't abundant is good ideas and ability to execute. And so, in knowing what you have and knowing the value of what you have. And so, we're open to raising money, but I think what's most important is aligning with investors that understand the mission, understand why we're doing, can see the vision, and that's more important than the money aspect.